About 2 months ago, I made the decision to upgrade from my old IPS monitor to a new OLED monitor, specifically the Gigabyte FO27Q2. And since then, I've learned a lot about my specific OLED monitor as well as just OLED monitors in general. So come along as I go over my experiences going from an IPS monitor to an OLED monitor. And maybe my experience will either entice some people to get an OLED monitor or give you a reason to hold off. Now, before going any further, I want to kind of explain and give you a reason on why I even got this OLED monitor in the first place. For about 3 years, I've been using this 27-inch 1440p 165Hz Scepter monitor, and honestly, I was completely happy with it for about 2.9 of those 3 years. But recently, I started to look for things in my setup that I could upgrade, and the one thing that stood out was my monitor. So after a ton of research on a ton of different OLED monitors, I finally came across this one and decided it was perfect for my needs. The first thing that I noticed when upgrading was the actually true blacks that OLED panels give you. Now, I'm sure if you know anything about OLED monitors, you were probably expecting me to say that, but I cannot express to you how much having actually black blacks does to really anything you view on your monitor. The thing with IPS panels is no matter how dark your screen gets, there will always be that bright backlight behind the panel, which causes those gray blacks, and in some cases, even brighter patches on the corners, which is called light bleed. However, what makes OLEDs excel in their blacks is that there is no backlight. In fact, each and every pixel can be individually turned off, meaning the black parts of your screen are literally black because those pixels are completely turned off. The outcome of this is something that allowed me to be even more immersed into both shows, movies, or especially games, specifically horror games, which I think benefit the most from the true blacks. But with OLED monitors, not only do the dark parts of the image look miles better than IPS, so do the bright parts. OLED monitors can get pretty bright when looking at things in standard dynamic range or SDR. However, when turning on HDR is when you'll genuinely feel the amount of light that comes off of the screen. To break HDR down to its simplest, it allows you to see a wider range of colors, as well as my favorite part, actually allowing the bright parts of the screen to actually get brighter and not just wider. What I mean by that is if you're looking at the sun in, I don't know, Red Dead Redemption 2. In normal SDR, sure, the sun will look bright, but it'll also just be the same brightness as the rest of the screen. However, with HDR, the pixels on the sun will actually be brighter than the rest of the image, making it just stand out so much more. This feature alone made playing games like Cyberpunk way more immersive and visually appealing than anything my IPS could show. Now, I know some IPS monitors actually do have HDR support, but other than the fact that my old monitor didn't have HDR support, the true blacks and really vibrant visuals that come off of an OLED screen are just way better than anything an IPS can show, like I just said. All that is made even better by the fact that essentially every OLED monitor has a glossy screen. Now, I know that may sound a bit annoying or even distracting, and I actually thought that before buying my monitor. So I personally went out of my way to buy an OLED screen with a slightly anti-reflective coating on it. However, even with that coating, the glossiness is very apparent, and it honestly makes everything you look at look so much better. The only way I can explain it is instead of looking at the screen and just feeling like you're looking at a screen, when the monitor is glossy, it kind of makes you feel like you're looking through a window at what you're looking at, which makes everything look so much better. Now, for people that have a desk setup with a window right behind them, this may be something you'll want to keep in mind because not only would the reflections be pretty distracting, on OLED monitors, bright light shining directly at the monitor can actually raise the blacks. And on monitors with QD OLED panels like mine, the blacks may even turn slightly magenta colored. So depending on where your setup is in relation to windows in your house, there may be a pretty big downside into getting an OLED monitor. I personally don't run into this issue because my monitor is on the same wall as my window. Another benefit of OLED monitors is the incredibly low latency due to how fast each pixel can change. Now, what that means for most things you'll be doing on your screen, like web browsing or watching videos, is essentially nothing. However, when playing games is when you'll truly feel the difference. Not only does my OLED monitor have an incredibly low latency compared to my old IPS at just 0.03 milliseconds, but it also has essentially zero ghosting due to another benefit of OLED monitors being the minimum of 240 Hz refresh rate. My old Scepter was 165 Hz, which honestly was perfectly fine because I'm the type of person to prioritize visuals over FPS. So most of the time I couldn't even fully utilize the 165 Hz on my old monitor. But just being able to have the ability to see 240 frames in games where my PC can get that type of performance, or inevitably when I upgrade my PC to something much higher end, having that ability is just super nice. Another thing that I noticed and wanted to mention was in the few games where I saw screen tearing on my old monitor, such as The Witcher 3, I just don't have screen tear anymore. I'm not sure the science behind that or why the specific reason is, but since getting the OLED, I just haven't seen any screen tear at all in any game, so that's also a nice benefit. Now, after going over all of that, the huge elephant in the room that I'm sure a lot of you guys are waiting for me to mention is burn-in. If you're not familiar with the term, burn-in is when a static image is on the screen for a prolonged period of time without moving, causing that image to burn into the screen, meaning you'll just see it as a slight ghost even after moving the screen. After 2 months and almost 500 hours of use, I not only don't have burn-in on my monitor, but I don't even think about it anymore. Before I got this monitor, my main pain point with OLEDs was the fact of burn-in. However, nowadays with 3rd gen OLED panels, there's so many things to prevent burn-in that it really doesn't even matter anymore. There's pixel cleaning, where the monitor will search for outlying pixels, which have a different brightness than the rest of them, otherwise known as burn-in. After that, it'll adjust the voltage to compensate. This feature, at least on my monitor, automatically turns on after a certain period of time and when it gets the chance, when the monitor's turned off. There's also features like pixel shift, which periodically moves the entire image a few pixels in a random direction, which may sound a bit distracting, but honestly, you really do not notice it. There's also sub-logo dimming, which looks for static images or logos on the screen and turns down their brightness very slightly to prevent burn-in, obviously. And lastly, there's static control, which after nothing moves on your screen for a certain period of time, it will dim the entire screen. All these features are automatically turned on by default and all work together to essentially prevent the worry of burn-in. But if for some reason you'd like to turn off one or all these features, which I really do not recommend, you do have the ability to do so on essentially any OLED monitor. If you do end up getting an OLED monitor after watching this video at some point, and you're also on Windows, I'd recommend turning on auto hiding taskbar. I originally thought this setting would be pretty annoying, but honestly, I feel like I couldn't go back to having it static on the bottom of my screen. I just prefer it now. I'd also recommend making sure your PC automatically turns off or goes to sleep after about 5 minutes, just to make sure nothing is on your monitor for too long. Another thing that's a pretty big difference, and something that I didn't really know before buying my monitor, is how often I need to clean it. Now this might just be an OCD me type of thing, but besides the fact that I want my screen to be perfectly clean essentially at all times, seeing any marks from either spit or especially fingerprints on a glossy screen is a lot easier than a matte screen. To be fair, it's really only apparent, and you can really only see the marks on the screen when the screen's fully off, but they are still there, and that honestly kind of annoys me. When it comes to cleaning OLED monitors, specifically in my instance, QD OLED monitors, it is not as simple as just getting a rag and rubbing the screen with, I don't know, distilled water or something. To prevent damage and really streaky looking messes after cleaning your monitor, you'll want to put 70% ethyl alcohol on a brand new microfiber towel. After doing that, gently rub the whole screen or any specific parts that you want to clean, and after doing that, grab a new microfiber towel and dry it very slowly. And obviously, you also want to make sure your monitor is off when doing this. I actually do this like once a week on very small spots when I inevitably somehow put my thumb on the monitor. I don't even know how I do that. So to prevent me from wasting entire microfiber towels when cleaning my monitor very often, I just cut like 3-inch squares off of an actual microfiber towel, so I'm not wasting them. So with that being said, would I recommend getting an OLED monitor for people that don't have one? Yes. Actually, it depends. If you're willing to go out of your way and kind of adjust how you interact with your monitor, such as turning it off when you get up and leave, or being very careful when cleaning the monitor, then I don't think you'll have an issue adjusting to having one. However, one thing I haven't really mentioned yet is the insane price difference between IPS monitors and OLED monitors. Even though prices have gone down significantly in the past few years, OLED monitors can be up to 4 times the price of a very similar IPS monitor. But if you can afford it, you really cannot get better than OLED monitors, and I am extremely happy with mine. Since switching to my new monitor, I've enjoyed literally every second of using it, and I cannot imagine going back to anything other than OLED.